The folks over at Penelope have built their name and reputation by blending some of the best whiskeys coming out of MGP. And earlier this month, they dropped the 2025 rendition of the Estate Collection, a 5-bottle lineup, which might just be the MGP version of the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Now in this video, we're going to be breaking down the crown jewel of them all to answer the age-old question, is it worth hunting down and is it worth its hefty price tag? Let's find out. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Brandon Spinner, the Whiskey Weatherman, and you have stormed yourself into the one YouTube channel where it is always whiskey weather. Now, before we dive into the full review, I am this close to reaching 15,000 subscribers, which was my goal by the end of September. So if you're a fan of honest bourbon reviews, make sure to hit that subscribe button below and help push this channel up into the next stratosphere. And while you're here, I got another question for you. Let me know in the comments, what is the most money you have ever paid for a bottle of bourbon or whiskey? And was it worth it? Drop that below and let's dive right into the review. Today's Pourcast is of this Penelope Estate Collection Founders Reserve 13-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And this release is from Penelope's aforementioned 2025 Estate Collection, which has 5 bottles this year. Of course, that comes with the 2 single barrel bourbons coming from 2 different recipes. The Private Select Estate Collection bottle, which was one of my favorites of 2024. And then the new one to the lineup, the Penelope Omega, an 11-year-old bourbon. And the crown jewel of them all, the Penelope Estate Collection Founders Reserve 13-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Now, the MSRP on these range from $79.99 for the most affordable to $199.99 for this crown jewel, which is this Estate Collection Founders Reserve. Now, the release, as I mentioned, is part of that whole lineup. You see, it comes in a collector's box, and on the box it says, Founders Reserve represents the pinnacle of Penelope Bourbon's craftsmanship. This is a 13-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. It is meticulously aged in Char 3 American oak barrels from the renowned East Bernstead cooperage. It showcases a heavy toast profile defined by deep complexity and a commanding character, the most distinguished in the Estate Collection. It is a rare expression that reflects an unwavering pursuit of quality and legacy. Now, as you see, it does come in that collectible box with a presentation style very reminiscent of another major distillery's elegant lineup. Some might say that this is Penelope's play at the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. I think the bottles do look a little similar, if you don't mind me saying that. Now, this bottle does come in at 121.4 proof. It is 13 years old, as I mentioned, and it does check in with a mash bill of 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% malted barley. Now, what does make this so interesting is, I mentioned, it's a Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, which is a little bit alarming, or at least raises some flags, because the folks over at Penelope are owned by Luxco and get a majority of their whiskey from the folks over at MGP, which is in Indiana. So this cannot be an MGP distilled whiskey because it would have to be labeled as an Indiana Straight Bourbon. So where is this coming from? Well, on their website it says that this is coming from or sourced from Bardstown's Best, which makes you wonder exactly where this liquid came from. Now, my guess is this is coming from the folks over at Heaven Hill. Full transparency, the folks over at Penelope did send me this bottle, but as always, you're going to get my unbiased take and review on it. Now, let's see if it's any good. If you are new here, I rate and review all my bourbons and whiskeys on my own custom 10-point rating scale, which I call the lightning counter. It's a rating scale which judges each pour on 5 equal categories: the nose, flavor, mouthfeel, finish, and ultimately the value, all worth 2 points each. Now at the end, we total it up to see where it stacks up against everything else I've reviewed so far this year. And right now that top spot is still held by Jack Daniel's 14. So let's see if this Penelope's Founders Reserve 13-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey can knock it off that pedestal. First up, the nose. That is beautiful. I could smell that all day. That's very sweet, but dark fruits, some dark oak, but some sweet oak. Some cherries, maybe even a hint of like some nuttiness. I wouldn't call it peanut brittle, but it's got like a a Heaven Hill peanut funk to it a little bit. I get that off of some of their expressions, where it's not Jim Beam nuttiness, but you certainly can smell some of that nuttiness to it. Yeah, cherries, some vanillas. I'd even call it more like a confectioner's sugar. Brown sugars, maybe even a slight hint of chocolate. Damn, that is really good. That's going to get a 2.0 out of 2. So perfect score so far. Well, let's see how it tastes. I'm going to skip the flavor real quick. The mouthfeel is very warm, oily, has a little bit of a sharpness to it, but you can definitely tell it's 120 proof, or run 120, 1.4. Overall, very, very nice. That mouthfeel, I'm going to give that a 1.9 out of 2. So 2.0 and 1.9, nose and mouthfeel, almost as perfect as you can get. On that flavor, it is still talking to me on the back end. Wow, that finish is... I am very impressed by this already. This has Bourbon of the Year contender. That's definitely possible. Just that thick oiliness, it like coats your entire mouth. It is there from the beginning to the end. Well done, Danny. Well done. Ah, that flavor. You get more of what you got on the nose, to me. It very much matches. You've got some of those cherries, not quite a whole lot of cherry, but some dark red fruits. That brown sugar, not much chocolate, but that nuttiness does try to sneak through. I'd say more of like a dark oak. You can definitely get the oak, but it's not nearly as sweet as I got off the nose. It's more of like a dark, more tannic oak, but it's not super bitter. There is a hint of bitterness to it. Man, that is really good. I'm going to give that a 1.8. So 2.0, 1.8, 1.9, sitting at a 5.7 out of 6 so far. Let's get to the finish. Boy, that thing just keeps talking to me. Wow. That's really good. You know, it could be coming from Barton now that I think about it. It does kind of remind me of some of those Buckner's 13 barrels. I don't know. That finish has some of those dark fruits, but you get a little bit of the pepper there. It's not necessarily overpowering pepper. There is some heat towards the back end, maybe a little slight hint of cinnamon. I get some dark oak continuing, maybe a hint of vanilla on the back end. Very delicious finish. I'm going to also give that a 1.8. So we're looking at 2.0, 1.8, 1.9, 1.8. So far, it's a 7.5 out of 8, and we got to jump to the value. When it comes to the value on this, we're judging it off of the MSRP of $199.99 because that is the one thing that the distillery can control when it comes to price-wise. Now, secondary market, I've heard some people paying up to $600 for that. I wouldn't do that. I have bought an extra for myself at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. However, $109.99. When I look at this as a 13-year-old age statement at 120 proof, and then I look at the Buckner's 13-year with a 13-year-old age statement and $220, but more of a higher proof into the upper 130s, I'd say they're pretty close. However, 13 years, $199.99, we're getting further away from that $10 per year age statement, which I think is what the gold standard used to be. I know inflation and changes in the market here the last couple of years have changed that. With that said, probably going to knock it slightly for the value. This is better than last year's, I believe, 11-year-old wheat whiskey, which was bottled the same way in the same type of box. That was 11 years old at $200. I'm still going to give this a 1.6 out of 2 on that value score because it is slightly higher than I think it could be, especially when you think about some of the BTAC collection, which comes in at $150 for an MSRP. Still very good. The value is there. And I think this is slightly better than the Russell's 13-year, which has the exact same value. but 1.6 out of 2 does seem fair to me. So 1.6. So we're at 2.0, 1.8, 1.9, 1.8, 1.6. Drum roll, please. That comes out to a total lightning counter score of a 9.1 out of 10 on the lightning counter rating scale, which is in the excellent category. This, in fact, I think that ties it with the Jack Daniel's 14-year for my top bourbons and whiskeys so far here in 2025. So, very big contender for bourbon and whiskey of the year right here. This Penelope's Estate Collection 13-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Color me impressed, Batman. You know what this does? It does remind me of another bottle I have, and I'm only going to do this side by side just because that was my first guess of what the distillery it was. And that is the Elijah Craig C923 from obviously 2023. That was one of my favorites of 2023. It's got some of those similar characteristics. The nose is very close. Oh yeah, C923 is slightly darker on the nose. But they are very close. Color-wise, C923 might be slightly darker. It is at a higher proof though, I believe. That came in, what, at 133 proof. But this was also 13 years and 7 months old from Elijah Craig. Same mash bill as well, 78, 10, 12. So very similar characteristics. Not gonna lie. Elijah Craig might be slightly better. But if you loved the C923, this is definitely going to be a must-buy for you. I think the mouthfeel would just be the one thing that's a little bit better on the C923. Not necessarily as hot or as tannic, but they are both very similar in flavor and profile and in the finish as well. Just one was cheaper than the other and a little bit easier to find. However, boy, I have to say, Penelope, well done, gents. Danny, Michael, this is one to be proud on. Yeah, so a total lightning counter score of a 9.1 out of 10. So I would say that this is certainly worth the hype if you were to find one out there on the shelf. And speaking of hype, there is a brand new feature here to YouTube where you can hype the YouTube video, and it should be down there right where the comments are, and you might have to search for it. But by hyping that video, it helps small creators like myself just get pushed out a little bit more into the algorithm. So if you did enjoy this video and you haven't already hit that like button, which does give some hype points, hit that hype button below as well, because this is certainly a bottle that I think deserves to be a part of your collection. If you had $200 to spend, this would be an absolutely no-brainer. Now, I know it's not a casual pickup, but if you did find one at the SRP, trust me, I think it is absolutely worth it. And hopefully maybe you find it at Costco for a much better price as well. Once again, I have to thank folks over at Penelope for sending this bottle my way. Absolutely delicious. And I have to give a big shout out and thank you to all of my amazing Patreon members and YouTube members, which are all part of my Storm Chaser program. You can join through the description below, starting for as little as $3 a month. They get a bunch of great perks. They get a monthly bottle giveaway, as well as first access to videos similar to this and some of my other short videos and some exclusive reviews and polls as well. So a big shout out to the Storm Chaser Network, and we've got more barrel picks on the way, and they also get first dibs on that. And Danny, Michael, Jeeper, if you're hearing this, maybe we do a Whiskey Weather Penelope barrel pick. Just saying. I do want to give you a big shout out to all of them and a shout out to you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day today to watch this YouTube video. If you did enjoy it and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do so. As I mentioned, closer and closer to that 15,000 subscriber mark, which is my goal by the end of September. I end this video the same way I always do. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love those other videos up there, including some of the best bourbons and whiskeys to look for here in the month of September, which did include this bottle. Don't forget to drink responsibly, and remember, it is always whiskey weather. I'll see you up there in that next video. Cheers, y'all.